record.
We
Okay. Would anyone like to pray? Would anyone like to pray for us as we get started?
I can.
Thanks, Eli.
Dear Lord, thank you for allowing us to be here tonight, Lord. I just pray that you'll guide the study, Lord, guide the conversations, Lord. Just pray that as we round out this semester, that we can do so well, Lord. Just pray for the just pray this on.
Man. All right. Okay, so we're gonna be going through to verse 21, right? Yes, verse 21. So how many people we got? 6? Come on. We can't have one more person. Yeah, they didn't come. Yeah, look who's here. Oh, I guess Enoch's here. Enoch, you want to read?
Oh yeah. Yes.
We study.
No, I think we've got that covered.
Oh, sorry. We can leave the study.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, we'll figure it out. Actually, we'll have Enoch start and then we'll work our way
so
there.
14 all the way to.
So yeah, so we're starting in Mark 14, verse 1, and then reading through verse 21. So each person gets 3 verses.
Okay.
Okay. So and then we'll start at Enoch and we'll end at Jason.
Okay.
So
Perfect.
All right, we're ready?
Ready.
Okay, let's see. Mark 14. It was now 2 days before the Passover and the feast of unleavened bread. And the chief priests and the scribes were seeking how to arrest him by stealth and kill him. For they said, "Not during the feast, lest there be an uproar from the people." And while he was at Bethany in the house of Simon the leper, as he was reclining at table, a woman came with an alabaster flask of ointment of pure nard, very costly, and she broke the flask and poured it over his head.
Then there were some who said to themselves indignantly, "Why was the ointment wasted like that? For the ointment could have been sold for more than 300 denarii.
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 You're okay.
And given to the poor, and they scolded her. But Jesus said, "Leave her alone. Why don't you trouble her? Or why do you trouble her? She has done a beautiful thing to me. For you always have the poor with you, and whenever you want, you can do good for them, but you will always have me."
She has done what she could. She has come beforehand to anoint my body for burial. Assuredly, I say to you, whenever this gospel is preached in the whole world, what this woman has done will also be told as a memorial to her.
Then Judas Iscariot, and one of the 12, went to the chief priests to betray Jesus to tell them. They were delighted to hear this and promised to give him money. So he watched for an opportunity to hand him over. On the first day of the festival of unleavened bread, when it was customary to sacrifice the Passover lamb, Jesus' disciples asked him, Where do you want us to make the preparation for us to eat the Passover?"
And he sent 2 of his disciples and said to them, "Go into the city, and a man carrying a jar of water will meet you. Follow him, and wherever he enters, say to the master of the house, 'The teacher says, where is my guest room? Where may I eat the Passover with my disciples?' And he will show you a large upper room furnished and ready. They're prepared for us."
The disciples went into the city and found things just as Jesus had told them. So they prepared for the Passover. When evening came, Jesus arrived with the 12. While they were reclining at the table eating, he said, "Truly I tell you, one of you will betray me, one who is eating."
They were saddened, and one by one they said to him, "Surely you don't need me." It was one of the 12 who replied, "One who dips bread into the bowl with me. Son of Man will go just as it is written about him. But woe to that man who betrays the Son of Man. It will be better for him if he had not been born."
All right. Great. So thank you guys for reading. We're getting into chapter 14 here is starting to get to towards the end of the book. This chapter is actually pretty long when you look at like the number of verses and just sort of all the events that take place here. So we'll probably, as we get into the summer later on, we're probably going to be in chapter 14 for a little bit here. But yes, so let's go ahead and start going through this. So starting in verse 1 and 2, right? So I'll sort of read these again for us. Recap. It was now 2 days before the Passover and the Feast of Unleavened Bread, and the chief priests and the scribes were seeking how to arrest him by stealth and kill him. For they said, not during the feast, lest there be an uproar for the people. Can you actually, that chair is kind of in the camera, so sorry.
Or you can push yourself more back.
No, you're fine. He'll be okay, so.
We know the disciples. Jesus.
Oh, I see, yeah, I'm sorry. No lounging here, so, everyone needs to be uncomfortable while sitting at this table. Okay, so. First question I have here is, it says, it was 2 days before the Passover and the Feast of Unleavened Bread. Does anyone know what the difference is between those two things? What is the difference between the Passover and the Feast of Unleavened Bread? Yes, yeah, it's, so. They're not really, so whenever we speak of Passover, typically and talk about Passover, the Feast of Unleavened Bread is really grouped into that. So the Passover here they're referring to specifically is the meal that they share on like the first night. That is the Passover, that is like in the Exodus when God passed over Egypt, all the doors that had blood on them, he passed by, like that, it was like to remember that evening particularly. And then the Feast of Unleavened Bread is part of that the week that following week they only eat unleavened bread. And it's again a sort of remembrance of when God brought them out, and when they're in the wilderness, it's when they went to the wilderness, especially they ate unleavened bread. So that's why he mentions both. It's just saying it's not really that big of a difference. I mean, in terms of like there's not some deep like meaning here between the two things. It's just more like there's kind of like just saying three important parts of Passover.
What verse did you read?
What?
What verse?
There's 1 and 2.
Yeah, that was just verses 1 and 2, yeah. So for that first part. So yes, so we have here that the chief priests and scribes, right, they're seeking to arrest him. It says by stealth, right, and kill him. So they're looking for a way to like, okay, we're gonna take him out, but we're gonna do this secretly. We're gonna find a way to do this. I guess the question I have though, if they say that they're gonna do it by stealth, is this something that do they just want to kill Jesus in secret, like just kill him somewhere and then just sort of abandon the scene, or do they want this to somehow to be public in some way?
You probably want it to be public because they want to like discredit his teachings. Right? They don't want Jesus gone, they want him and his ideas gone. So
Yeah. No, I good point. That's very good. That's essentially kind of what I had here. Okay. I would like a volunteer who would like to read in a specific section for a while, because I have several verses that are in the same area. So rather than having different people read from the same thing, I'll just have someone, because I have other verses from other places, but I figured it was easier. So who would like to be the brave volunteer for tonight to stay to read from this section?
I got
Michael, thank you. Okay, first I'm gonna have you turn to John. So this is John 11 and 12, very close packed area here. So John chapter 11. John chapter 11 verses 50 and 52.
like you just
52.
The whole thing?
You could ask.
The book of John.
The whole.
No,
All of them.
every book of John. John chapter 11 verses 50 through 52. So 50, 51. Yep.
Do you not realize that it is better for you that one man die for the people than the whole nation perish? He did not say this on his own, but as a high priest that you professed it that Jesus would die for the Jewish nation, and not only for that nation, but also for the scattered children of God, to bring them together and to make them one.
Thank you. Yeah, so that's the high priest of the time named Caiaphas that's speaking there. He's not completely aware of what he's saying, because of what he's saying, like, is it not better that one man die than the whole nation perish, right? I mean, he's more coming, when he hears that, he's more coming at it from the perspective of, let's not get the whole nation in trouble, it's just better to take out this one guy, but, and so I think that sort of communicates the idea that they want this to be something that's like, that's done, like, because they consider him to be important, so they want to do this publicly or have this done publicly in a way to like, publicly like shame him and like, we're gonna fix this issue, so it's not something they're just gonna take care of him in the dark and then like, they're planning something. I mean, also, it would, to, eventually what they do sort of helps them, at least before the people, to seem like, oh yeah, they're not doing anything wrong, like, they're doing the right, they're yeah, anyway. And then, but yeah, it is interesting though, they do finish off, they say, not during the feast, lest there be enough work from the people, so they're like, we're gonna do this, and we're gonna need to kill him, but not exactly during the feast, because we're real scared of the people. They're not scared of God, who, I mean, Jesus Christ, human flesh, like they're trying to kill, but they are scared of how the people will perceive them, which is definitely not the attitude to him. But yeah, that's all I really have for those two verses. Not just a bit of exposition to get started. Any questions on those two? Any thoughts there? Okay, verse 3. While he was at Bethany in the house of Simon the leper, as he was reclining at table, a woman came with an alabaster flask of ointment of pure nard, very costly, and she broke the flask and poured it over his head. Okay. Question. There's a guy here. His name is in the house of Simon the leper. Does anybody know who Simon the leper is? He is Simon the leper. I mean, do you know anything else that he did in scripture? Anything else about Simon the leper?
Was that the leper that returned, you think? Am I not thinking?
It's not actually, that is, so it's a trick question, because this is actually this and the parallel Matthew passage are the only time we hear about Simon the leper. So, yeah, that's it. It's
Oh.
we don't know too much about him. It's sort of like referred to where this is his home that he's at, which, I mean, this is it's great that this man invited Christ to come into his home and to have a meal for him there. And they recline at table, but yeah, we don't really know too much about him. It is important to note, it says Simon the leper, he probably just had leprosy at some point. It is not probable that he probably still had leprosy at the time, especially because they're in his home. Can we?
That'd be kind of funny. So.
Yeah.
Staying in his home would not cure of leprosy.
Yeah, that's not, Allie, can you read Leviticus chapter 13, verse 46, please? So Leviticus chapter 13, verse 46.
If they have the disease, they must live alone and they must live outside.
Yeah, so the idea here is that he shouldn't be living in this household. He shouldn't be here. He should be outside the camp for a time if he still has leprosy. So I think they probably use this name to distinguish him from other, because you have Peter who's called Simon, and you have like Simon and Zealot, you have other Simon. So it's like this is this Simon the leper who had leprosy at one point or another. So just an interesting point to mention. Okay. Back to you. I need you to read from John chapter 12, 1 through 3, verses 1 through 3.
6 days before the Passover, Jesus came to Bethany, where Lazarus lived, whom Jesus has raised from the dead. Here a dinner was given to Jesus in Jesus' honor. Martha served while Lazarus was among those recycling at the table with him. Then Mary took about a pint of pure nard, an expensive perfume. She poured it on Jesus. She wiped his feet with her hair, and the house was filled with the fragrance and of the perfume.
Thank you. So question, is this the same? Is the event described here in John the same event that's happening here in Mark and subsequently in Matthew?
Even though it's referred to in two different places.
You mean,
Like
sorry,
that was saying, what Michael went through, they said that was in the house of Lazarus. And then here it's saying in the house of.
so you're already picking up on some details that, so there's actually not a general consensus on this question, which is really interesting.
Okay.
So there's actually quite a few modern scholars that are inclined to say that this is the same count, and they have ways to resolve some of the things. I'll describe more of the things here in a sec, but the reason I bring this up is just in terms of the characters of the story, like we have Simon the leper here, and then we have this woman who pours this breaks the alabaster flask and pours it on his head. If these are the same story, we can actually, it kind of gives us a little bit of interesting information, just because this woman is Mary, of Mary and Martha, not Jesus' mother, or Mary Magdalene. There's a lot of people with the same name here. We have to, so, but that's doing this, and we don't need to read that verse. So Simon the leper, you might infer, because it says like the house of Lazarus there, you could say, well, maybe Simon the leper is this is like a relative somehow of them, like he's also related. Or another thing is, I'm not sure, some translations just, you can infer maybe it's like in the hometown of Lazarus, like, so they're in Simon the leper's home, but it's not necessarily their home, it's like in a local area. So that can give you, if you choose to accept that, then you can believe like, oh yeah, maybe Simon the leper is related to them somehow, or so that gives you a bit more info. But as mentioned, there are some issues with this. The story at the beginning, the first two verses said it was now 2 days before the Passover, and so you would infer that the next story should also be 2 days, but in there it said it was 6 days beforehand. So you're sort of right into that conflict of how do you resolve that. Also, you have the woman's pouring it on his head, and in that story she was putting it on his feet, right, with her hair, wiping it with her hair on his feet. So you have like a couple of different places there, and then again the thing with the home. But people have arguments there, and then you can also say maybe.
Do we know it's the same woman both times? Maybe
We don't.
happened twice.
Yeah, it may be two different women, and that's fine. People also talk about there's a Luke story where something like this happens as well, but that's like for sure it's not the same account because of the state of like who the one was described to be, and then it's like it's a Pharisee's home that Jesus is in, so it's like that's a different story. But these ones there's a bit more of like a contested. So I figured if you're curious to look into that more, you can. So. But yes, let's see.
I have a question.
Yeah,
What's nard?
so I'm getting into that a little bit.
Okay.
I can't remember if I gave an exact, this is just like a nice like oil. It was just an anointing oil that they would pour on.
A little more than that.
What?
I
Oh, you did?
I'll be honest. I
Okay,
don't have this knowledge off the top of my head.
okay,
But
you can
it's,
share though,
it's
please.
like an oil that grows in the Himalayas and like Nepal, China, and India. So very expensive for, people in this part of the world to have at this time.
Yeah,
But it was also used a lot of times in the Old Testament to prepare something for burial, or something for burial. So it's very symbolic that it's used on Jesus here.
yeah,
It'd be like if, I don't know, the coroner would come up to you and like size you up for a coffin, right? That's
that's
going
That's essential, and that's more of the later part of this section, so we'll hit on that again. Where he talks about she's preparing me for burial. We'll come back to that thought. But yeah, you're absolutely right. This is very expensive. It mentions that there is very costly. Like, so this was not easy to come by at all. And another interesting thing too. Maybe I'll actually, Jason, we can keep talking. Leviticus 8:30. I'm gonna read that. Another sort of use of this oil, sort of thing in the complex of it.
Moses took some of the anointing oil and made, or anointing oil and some of the blood from the altar and sprinkled them on Aaron and his garments and on his sons and their garments. So he consecrated Aaron and his garments and his sons and their garments.
So it's also, I mean, the oil was oftentimes, there's, the big thing of this being like, yeah, they would prepare the bodies for burial, which again, we'll come back to this again, but also this was something that they would use to consecrate, priests before they went to a holy place, or like just to ready them for this. So you can also take this as just like her recognizing, I mean, just worshiping Christ and just honoring him in this way by showing him this, that like this respect and putting them in this position. You know, because I don't, you know, at the time, I don't think she would have realized what, you know, that she was preparing for burial. Like she wouldn't think like, oh, that, like, you know, because even with the disciples, they were like, I don't know what he's talking about. He's not gonna die, right? So it's but that's ultimately what, I mean, it's another one of those things where it's like, they don't realize what they're doing, but they are, that's, I mean, this is what they're. So, yeah, so, and then just the last thing to mention here, so this is very expensive, and she goes and pours on the head. It's interesting, it says she broke the flask and poured it over his head. There's other interpretations that may just be like she like shook it, or just like really like scraped it out per se to get everything, but she was like, the idea here is she was not wasting a single drop of this. Like, it was gonna get used, and she was gonna use all of it on him. Like, she wasn't just gonna, I'll pour a bit and then I'll leave whatever's left. It was like, I'm giving this all to you. And I mean, that should be the idea of the Christian, is when we offer to Christ, like we should be willing to give all of what we have. I think we've seen that in a couple of like earlier stories, just like loving the Lord our God with all our heart. You know, and how the widow gave all that she had, even if it was little. And here's, I mean, she has much, and that's like that in this oil, but she gives it all to Christ. So yeah, that's how I have for verse 3. That was my longest section probably. So and just talking about the comparison of the passages. Any questions on verse 3? No. Okay, good. So verses 4 to 5. We have, so this just says there were some who said themselves indignantly, it says, why did the women waste it like that? This could have been sold for more than 300 denarii and given to the poor. And then they scolded her. So they're like, seriously, what are you doing? You know, it's and again, I'll mention, if you do believe that this is the same account as the John passage, then this was actually Judas saying these things. Which Michael, can you read John 12 verse 6?
Of course.
Told you I was gonna.
He did not say this because he cared about the poor, but because he was a thief. As a keeper of the money bag, he used to help himself to what was put into it.
Yeah, so, right, so that John adds that part on and talking about, I mean, what we're eventually gonna be talking about with Judas here of like this, I mean, he didn't say these things because he actually was like really cared about it. He was a thief. He wanted to keep the money for himself and to use it that way. And but again, we don't know, I mean, for sure if these are the same story. It could be that these were a set of different disciples that may have included Judas, we don't know. But if you do accept that, then oh yeah, this is Judas, and that sort of adds more to this whole chapter of what this is, what it's sort of building to, where it's starting off. It's like you sort of start to see the signs. But yeah, I mean, they're coming from a perspective who are saying this of like, I mean, come on, wouldn't it be good to use this for other things? Like, why waste it all here? I was worth so much. I mean, it doesn't even have to be for bad uses, as it says there that Judas would have, I could not get the name out of my mouth. Judas was thinking, but like, oh, maybe we can use this to help our ministry in other ways. You know, we can do this or that. So I mean, is that a bad thing to use it for other things? Like, I mean, was there blame? I mean, is there something wrong with that? Or I don't know. What do you guys?
Using the funds.
Yeah, I mean, what do you guys think? Like,
I don't think the thought was bad, but if it was actually used in that way, and keep in mind if Jesus or Judas was to hold the money, maybe there could have been some really bad like actions towards that he would have partaken.
Yeah,
Yeah, and that's also the thing. It's like, okay, it seems, at least on the outset, right, so noble. Like, okay, why not use it for the ministry? But then, according to the John passage, right, it's clear that, what's Judas's motive, right? He's
Yeah.
a thief. So
yeah,
that's
exactly.
just a warning about, I guess, again, hypocrisy, right? It's like, okay, on the outside, everyone's like, wow, you're so noble, you're like so humble. But then, if you look at the inside, right, like what Samuel said, right, the Lord looks at the heart. So,
Yeah.
at least what God said. So, yeah.
Yeah, and oftentimes I think what happens is kind of in line with that, even if we don't intend to do something terrible with the money, but like we'll say, oh, we could probably use that for something better, and then it just ends up being used in ways that aren't. Like you are like, I'm just gonna keep saving this, and you don't use it, and then you just like it. I mean, yeah, it's just yeah, we shouldn't. Let's not. I mean, she was wanting to give liberally of this. She just wanted to give all of it. She wanted to and bountifully like to Christ, and like we shouldn't scoff at that. So if you remember earlier, Mark, we talked about the all that we have is Korban. We were talking about this is everything I have. I need to give to God. So I'm not going to give to I'm not gonna help. I can't help my parents. I can't give to my family. Or I can't honor my family in this way because I have to honor and give it to God. Maybe we can. I have the verses here. Whose turn? Hannah, would you like to read Mark 7 verses 11 through 13?
Okay.
Oh, okay. I was like, oh, I'm like, I'm pretty sure that was next.
Mark 7:11 through 15.
13.
But you say, if a man tells his father or his mother, whatever you would have gained from the Korban, this is given to God, then you no longer permit him to do anything for his father or mother, thus making void the word of God by your tradition that you have handed down. And such things you do. And when he called the people to him again, and he said to them, hear me, all of you, and understand.
Yeah. So, right, they're trying to say, oh, I don't need to honor my father and mother in this way or honor these people. It's just I give it to God, so I'm just going to give it to them. I don't need to help them because that's and we don't want to be on that side where you're like, well, no, it's God still that's the law. God still calls you to honor your family to do these. On the same side, it's good to recognize that. Oh no, it shouldn't just be all about we need to do all of this for people. I need to give all of this money to people and. I can, if I have anything left, I'll give to God, maybe, but all this is just to serve people. Like, we need to be also like, no, some of this is for the worship of God, and I want to honor him with this and give this to him. And so it's sort of, we sort of have both sides of like, don't fall into the side where you say, I can neglect people because I'm giving everything to God, or on the other side where you're like, God understands, I'm just gonna give everything. I just need to focus on serving. I just need to focus on helping these people and not giving this, just because that's sort of what's happening here. Like, she's wanting to worship Christ in this way, but they're saying, no, you can't do that. Like, we shouldn't prevent that. So, I'll go ahead and I don't want my portion take too long. So I'll keep chugging along here. You can always interrupt me if you have questions. Continue on in verses 6 and 7. Jesus said, leave her alone. Why do you trouble her? She has done a beautiful thing to me. For you always have the poor with you, and whenever you want, you can do good for them, but you will not always have me. So, we see that. I mean, he says like, leave her alone. Like, this is a wonderful thing that she's done. Like, why are you scoffing her? Like, why are you scolding her for this? Like, this is, he said, it's a beautiful thing. Like, this is a great thing. She gave of what she had cheerfully to him. And that's sort of we mentioned this again when we were talking about the widow giving what she had. She gave all of that oil, and she gave it with joy. She was like, I want to give this to him. And so we shouldn't hold that back, right? And So then Jesus says, like, for you always have the poor with you, whenever you want, whenever you want, you can do good for them, but you not always have me. So, right, he's saying, right, so is he saying, yeah, the poor will always be there, so you can get to them another time? Is that what he's
I mean, kinda,
kind
I mean,
of, maybe not in that, maybe not in that
what he's
tone,
saying.
though. I mean, it's maybe not in that tone, though, in that specific, like, yeah, well, lazy, like, we'll get to them, but like, it's a matter of like, I mean, he's here right now, like, he's with us. So I have a couple verses to read here. So Eli, can you read Deuteronomy 15:11? And then I'm gonna come back to you. Allie, can you read Mark 2:19-21?
For there will never cease to be poor in the land, therefore I command you, you shall open wide your hand to your brother, to the needy and to the poor in your land.
Yeah, so just quick note on that one, I mean, that's a law in the Old Testament, that's God is commanding the people to, like, you are to do this, like, this is not something optional, and you are to. So it's like, it's not something we can just sort of be lazy on, like, this is, I mean, we should always be doing good, right? But God, so read the Mark passage,
Mark 2.
19 and 20, yep.
Jesus answered, how can the guest of the bride from pass while he's with them? They cannot, so long as they have him with them. But the time will come when the bridegroom will be taken from them, and on that day they will fast.
Yeah, so this is a time of, like, Christ is present here with us, like, he's here now, like, that's the time to rejoice, and it's like these tasks can still be done, and we can, I mean, it's not like they weren't done when Christ was there, but it's a matter of, like, this is the time to worship, like, he's here, like, pay attention to him, listen, like, worship him, and I mean, you can of course worship him still now, but it was just like, he's here, like, dwelling with us and talking with us, like, that's something to, and at least want to honor him now, like, the bridegroom's here, like, celebrate with him, like, enjoy, like, it's not time to fast yet, right? So, yeah, it should just be, what was I gonna say? Yeah, he's just saying, like, she is doing a great thing, you should just go with that. And that is just as good this is just as good of a thing for her to do as it is to serve the poor, right? But you'll always have the poor here, you can always keep serving them, but you won't always have me here, and so what she's done for me is really good. So, and then in verse 8 says, she has done what she could, she has anointed my body beforehand for burial, so this is kind of what we talked about a little bit already, right? So it's interesting. First, he says she has done what she could. It's I probably won't read this. I was read this verse, but there's a in 2 Corinthians. There's a it's in chapter 8. It says, like, you're doing everything you can, and you're doing it with joy, and that's, like, the great thing. You're giving all you have, and you're doing it happily. There's not any sort of, like, oh, I'm doing all this, but I hate to do it. I hate to give all this up. Like, there's a joyfulness to it, and that's exactly what she's doing. Like, it's just saying she's done what she could. Like, she's honoring me and worshiping me in the way that she can, and that's she did it joyfully, and that's great. It is interesting here. We read through the passages earlier in Mark 8, 9, and 10 about Jesus predicting his death. This is the fourth time technically that he does it. So it's, because he says it's beforehand for burial. He's saying, I'm gonna die. So Christ at this point, I mean, as you can imagine, I mean, if we understand the timeline of, like, 2 days before the Passover, I mean, this is right about when he's going to be crucified. Like, he is thinking about this. He's prepared for it. I mean, he's he's faithful to God, even to death, all the way through. Like, Jason, can you read Philippians 2, verse 8?
And being found in appearance evidently, he humbled himself by becoming obedient to death, even death on the cross.
So he knew his death was coming, but he's very much, he's like, he's obedient to it all the way, and he's like, I'm being prepared for my burial. I mean, oftentimes, I don't think once you get to the point where you're getting close to death, you are want to enjoy having conversations about what your casket's gonna be at, where you're gonna be at, right? But, we probably want to put those, I mean, it depends on the person. I mean, I mean, especially for the Christian, I mean, later on in life, you have that joy to be like, well, I'm gonna be with Jesus, so that's great. But it's still not like, I mean, that's not a first conversation. You're gonna be like, oh yeah, I can wait to talk about my casket, what's casket's gonna look like. But I mean, Christ is here, just like, I'm ready for it, I want to. So. Yeah, Michael, can you read John chapter 12, verse 4?
He has blinded their eyes and hardened their hearts, so they can neither see with their eyes nor understand with their hearts, nor turn, and I would heal them.
I don't think that was the verse I wanted. Hold on. Okay, hold on.
I read John 12.
He read, that is not the one I want, hold on. No, I'm sorry, okay, I had it there and I couldn't remember what that. I definitely remember part, okay, I'm sorry, I don't remember what that first was. So. I had it connected to this, but that definitely wasn't weird, okay. Apologies, I'm sorry, I'm not, I forgive you, I'm sorry, okay. So the last note I just have on this is like, yeah, I just had it like a question, which I don't really think we can do that, but it was like, did the anointing oil stick around even when he was buried? Like, did this last until he was really buried?
The Roman soldiers like, wow,
He's good. Yeah, like that's not, it's not the point of like, oh, she's buried, it's like, I'm prepared for burial now, and that's gonna like, but it was of like symbolizing of like what was gonna be taking place, and right, which kind of gets back to our discussion there of like that there are practices of like anointing a body of oil or washing it for purification and stuff, but when you bury it, and we do see later that like they did, like when they did put Christ's body in the tomb, they did wrap him in linen and put some spices in there and everything. But here it's just saying this is preparing him like to symbolically for like what's going to come, what's going to happen. So okay, I'll do verse 9, and then we'll have time for any questions or others. Actually, I guess I'll say, does anyone have any questions or anything? I only have a bit.
I mean, the other thing is like, I think it really just kind of, just shows further just how, you know, Jesus, he's at peace because, you know, he's completed his work, or he's at that point where it's over, he's not. Oh, I think most people, like when we pass, are like, oh, I wish I could have done this more, I wish I could have done this. Jesus has precisely done everything he was required to do, and everything he wanted to do.
Yeah.
So even though he has a lot more work, you know, like at the cross he has to do, all the steps up to this point have been completed perfectly to this point.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, that's a good point. Yeah, I mean, he's lived without sin, and he did exactly everything that he's not coming in like, oh, I should have done this or I should have done this. Like, he's fulfilled his mission, he's ready to finish it out. So good. Okay, verse 9. Truly I say to you, wherever the gospel is proclaimed in the whole world, what she has done will be told in memory of her. Did this come true?
Yes,
It did.
we're talking about it right now.
Yeah, you got it. Yeah, we're literally like talking about this sort right now. Like, it's in here. It's written in the Gospels. Like,
Yeah.
it's being told of her because
In
it's
multiple gospels.
yeah, at least for this.
Well,
and for
debate's
this-
like crap.
at least for this woman,
Oh, man.
at least for this woman in Matthew and Mark. I mean, it could be Mary, and it could be,
Dang
but we don't. We don't. We don't know for sure, right? But I mean, in either case, I mean, the story's being told, right? whether this is a different woman than Mary or not, like, this is, her story is being shared and told, and like, that's absolutely came true, right? And, now it's important, right, that, well, actually, I feel like most of my questions are just like silly, silly questions, so, our goal shouldn't be like, oh, so I need to just do a bunch of good things so people will talk about me in their memories and such, like, I mean, it's not bad to want to be remembered, especially like by family and stuff as you go on, but that's not what,
This took a turn.
it took a turn?
Yeah.
Sorry, I
Someday no one will remember us.
yeah. I mean. I'm sure, well, in heaven, we'll always do remember it, there probably will be a time, like, if, especially if time goes on a lot longer, that no one may remember anything that.
Feel like
that
a
we
Coco,
did, so,
you just fade away.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah, you died
Still
two
doing-
deaths, one when you die, the other when no one remembers you.
and no one remembers you, yeah. Oh, yeah, that's right, yeah. That's right, I forgot that, I heard you say Coco, but I totally, like, did not make the connection, so it's just, yeah. But anyway, like, this was, this is just saying, like, this was a good thing, and like, we as the church, like, should recognize this being a good thing, and like, be encouraged by it and take delight in it, like, when we see this, like, it's wonderful, so, whose turn is it to read? Or request? It's, whoever wants to read Ecclesiastes 7, verse 1. Well,
No, I'm only in John.
yeah, you're only John,
Verse what?
verse 1,
7 verse 1.
yeah, 7 verse 1.
A good name is better than precious ointment, and the day of death than the day of birth.
Yeah, so it's saying like there's, a good name is far more precious than like precious, which is kind of an interesting situation here, like he's talking about like this really like valuable appointment, but it's like, what you've done is gonna be remembered, like that's something to be celebrated, and something to be recognized. So, and it's in general, we're not, we shouldn't be boasting ourselves, but it's good to, when people are, doing good things for the church, like it's good for us to build up the church and to encourage others and to be thankful for that. Yeah, I think you can find a couple proverbs that emphasize just like the wisdom of like, it's do not boast in yourself, but boast in, ultimately boast in Christ, but just be thankful for all the church is doing and for what the body of Christ is doing. Sometimes, especially when the work, like, when you're in the midst of it, and sometimes you just don't see the fruits of anything you're doing, like it's really hard to want to keep going. So we just need to be looking out for church in that way. Oftentimes though as well, there are times where, when Christ says like, don't even let your left hand know what your right hand's doing, like there's good things we're gonna do, and literally no one's gonna know. No one's gonna know it happened. No one's gonna remember. No, you're not really gonna get a lot of applause or anything for it. It was a good thing you did, and and then maybe you talked to someone, you shared the gospel with someone when you were in some other state or some other country or something. You don't know if they received it all, and you don't know if you're ever gonna talk to that person again. Right, but that shouldn't make us worried, or that shouldn't like get us bitter about, oh, I didn't get the recognition I should for that. Because we have the confidence that, whenever God is using us as vessels to accomplish his mission, and whatever is to be done, like his will will be accomplished. And so that act of goodness, like, is still that act of faithfulness is considered beautiful, like, in God's sight, like that's a good thing, and that's to be cherished. I'll read from the part of Hebrews real fast as I finish up. I'm sorry, I always do this.
No, you're
fine.
fine.
Do this. Okay, this is from Hebrews 11. I'll just read a couple. So it says, so it goes through and just talking about how many people from like heroes of faith in the past, like, suffered mocking and flogging and chains and imprisonment, stoned, sawn in two, killed with a sword, went about in skins of sheep and goats, destitute, like all these things, right? Wandering about in deserts and mountains, and all these, though committed through their faith, right? So it talks about like their faith is committed to me by God. God sees that, and they're with him, you know, for eternity. But like they didn't at that time, they didn't receive what was to like the ultimate promise, right? What was, I mean, what we have now in the new covenant with being with Christ, like they hadn't received that. It hadn't come about yet. They hadn't received what they were promised at the time, but right, but that was okay. Like they still trusted in God, and but it says in verse 40, it says, since God has provided something better for us, that apart from us they should not be made perfect. So it's like through what they did, they are building up, that faith was used, you know, ultimately like to build up the church in modern day, like into all of these types point to Christ and what was to come. And so it's just, you know, we should be we may not see the fruit at the time, but be encouraged by that, you know. And even, you know, when we should just be, that's why oftentimes when we can say, hey, nice job, or like, you know, I'm really thankful for what you do. That's well, we should do it, you know, or this moment say like that was a beautiful thing to do, like worshiping God in that way, like that was great, and not try to take that away from, like, not try to be like, hey, that was good, but probably could have used that here instead. Like seriously, it's so just encourage, should be encouraging. But yeah, that's all I have for my part. Sorry for a while. Any other questions or anything about that section at all? Okay, if not, we're gonna go on to verse
10. So verses 10 and 11 is where we're gonna be starting out. You know, saying, then Judas Iscariot, who was one of the 12, went to the priest chiefs in order to betray him to them. And when they heard it, they were glad and promised to give him money when he saw opportunity to betray him. So we see verse 10 and 11 very much ties back into verses 1 and 2, talking about the Pharisees seeking for a sneaky way to you know, kind of cause this downfall of Christ that they were looking for. They know that they can't directly, you know, affect Jesus, as we kind of talk about, as best I can talk about, because, you know, they feared the crowds, they feared the backlash of the people overthrowing them. First question, why does Judas approach the priests? Why would he betray Judas? There's no direct answer to this, and this isn't like a trick question, but like general thoughts maybe surrounding, you know, what was going on in Israel at this time, kind of within culture and whatnot like that.
Well, something that I've heard a couple times was that Judas, you know, betrayed Jesus, went and told them about him, and he wanted to, Judas still envisioned this like great war or whatever that Jesus was going to lead, and that they overthrow the Roman government, and Judas kind of saw this, him telling these priests and like getting Jesus arrested as like kickstarting that. Like he thought, oh, Jesus is just gonna slay legions of Roman soldiers anyway, so what does it matter? It's like arrested. So he'll just break free and do his thing anyways.
Yeah.
So I might as well, you know, take these 30 pieces of silver now, just free money.
Exactly. No, I think you're exactly, when I looked online, that was a lot of what I found. They were kind of thinking like culture wise that, you know, Judas definitely probably was, you know, thought more of the violent way that, you know, toppling the Roman. And can you read Matthew 26:15?
Matthew 26.
15. This kind of goes a little bit kind of with what Dustin was talking about. We know also Judas was motivated by greed, kind of a thing.
What would you give me if I deliver him over to you? And they said, pay him 30 pieces of silver.
So like very much, you know, it was like the quick paycheck, but like 30 pieces of silver, what would What do you think that would, be about nowadays?
How big are these pieces?
30 pieces of silver, think, this is a working man's wage. Think that maybe. For a week, I guess, I don't know.
For a week, a working man rate.
That's how much the 30, so the 30.
That's what they would say, yeah, it was like a week's worth of.
$500.
$250 to $300. So that's, essentially Jesus was given up for, a very cheap TV.
Prostitutes get paid more than that, don't
I wouldn't know.
Yeah.
I don't have any idea.
they? Okay, maybe inappropriate statements.
Maybe,
I was just
maybe,
thinking-
maybe. Things
And
like
you
that.
can buy a lot of other different things for $200 as well.
I'm gonna go with a cheap TV instead, but, yeah.
Yeah, we'll go with that.
Yeah. But yeah, no, ultimately, we don't get a clear answer on this, Judas was certainly likely a patriot, of this country at this time, and was not happy about, the Roman Empire ruling over and controlling things, and, I think, another thing we kind of see this is like this idea of spiritual privilege, within like the church, just because you hold this high rank.
Just ignore it, yeah.
Is it, no, it's okay. Just because you have a high level within you would think, these 12 disciples, these guys have it, they're making it to heaven. If any of these people here, it's gonna be them, kind of thing, which, that doesn't really reflect well on their hearts, kind of thing. We don't know what's going on with that, so. Any thoughts on verses 10 and 11? So, the next, oh, god.
This might be beyond the scope of the study. But why did the priests have to wait for Judas to come to them? Why couldn't they just have him arrested? Anyways.
I think it's because Judas would have known like the whereabouts of like where Jesus was when he was, kind of a thing, like if Jesus was going to be resting, kind of a thing. That's what I kind of found online, that he was like a man on the inside. He knew when Jesus was going to be in solitude in the garden praying, and that's when they could have got him, kind of a thing.
They've also probably like, depending on the group that was there, like, it's not like every Pharisee got to see what he looked like, right? I mean, specifically when we get to the garden, it's good. Judas has to like, he says like the one who I kiss is the guy, is the man, right? So like, the reason he has to do that is because which one is he? Like it's not like Jesus always has like, I mean, sometimes we picture it that way. It's not like Jesus always has like this glowing face that sort of distinguishes him. Like, I mean, in Isaiah 53, it says like he was he was like not something to be noticed or like looked at, it's not something that stands out. So likely there might, a good portion of them like may have heard a lot about him and been angry about him, but not exactly sure which one he was.
Yeah.
Like,
And also the whole 30 pieces of silver thing, that's interesting because like in Zechariah and Jeremiah, there was already prophecy of that. So you just see here, Judas is, he thinks he's doing it just like, oh, on my own free will, but actually it's God's providential hand through all of it.
Yeah.
So,
yep.
No, yeah, for sure. Yeah. I mean, you would kind of think that maybe Judas would have known about these prophecies a little bit if he was, studying alongside Christ.
They also might have been trying to fulfill the prophecies.
That too, yeah, we don't really know
This
exactly.
had to happen before Jesus abolished the earthly
That's,
rules, so
I didn't think about it that way. Yeah.
maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, it's possible. I mean, especially once you, I don't know. I don't know.
We could talk about it.
I'm inclined more to think that he probably just didn't realize
Maybe
like what he
that's
was like.
very
Yeah.
possible as well.
Yeah.
So, the next section of verses, which I don't have a whole lot for, so if you guys come up with something, let me know. Verses 12 through 16, a lot of what I have, Dustin already talked about, but, and on the first day of the unleavened bread, when they sacrificed the Passover lamb, his disciples said to him, where will you have us go and prepare for you to eat the Passover? And he sent two of his disciples and said to them, go into the city, and a man carrying a jar of water will meet with you. Follow him, and whenever he enters, say to the master of the house, the teacher says, where is my guest room where I may eat the Passover with my disciples? And he will show you a large upper room furnished and ready and prepared for us. And the disciples set out and went into the city and found it as he had told them, and they prepared Passover. So, kind of like what Dustin said, like, you know, we hear this like the Feast of Unleavened Bread. It's the Passover and the Feast of Unleavened Bread are like traditionally two different things, but like Passover was the meal that you would eat in between sundown and midnight at that time. The Feast of Unleavened Bread was what followed that kind of thing, but you kind of use it interchangeably as such. Sorry. No, you're fine. No, I mean, it's most of what I think this section is just a bunch of neat little kind of culture things around this event. But you know, it's evident, you know, the disciples are like, you know, Jesus, we need to find this place. They have like a sense of urgency because you have to eat it between these two times. So, and you know, we see Jesus, he tells them to go, and he sends two disciples, 22:8. This is just a cross reference, yeah. Tells exactly who we're dealing with.
Jesus sent Peter and John saying, go and make preparations for us to eat the Passover.
So yeah, it's Peter and John doing this. Likely, you know, Jesus was out with the other disciples, probably teaching and whatnot at this time. He sent them to go do that, and then they came and collected them, and they all went and had the Passover meal. So another thing we see here is we see Jesus says to bind this man carrying a jug of water. This seems like a pretty like broad term. I don't know, like I feel like a man carrying a jug of water would be a pretty, like, there'd be a couple of those guys. Do you have any thoughts on that? Like, seems not very descriptive, I guess.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, I guess,
I don't know where I'm going with this.
I guess,
I do have a question.
I mean, I guess it's just the fact that like, but it says that this man will like, as a warning is gonna be like, meet you, you know, for like,
Mhm.
it's not. I mean, as if there's like several of them and then they just have to like, it's just, they're gonna just randomly run into one, but there's gonna be one that seems like, oh yeah, oh, hi, hello, like, what are you doing here, you know, sort of thing, like,
Mhm.
so they're just.
No, yeah, I think if they're gonna, yeah, they're certainly gonna encounter somebody that's probably who Jesus is talking about, but also. Carrying jugs of water was typically not done by men at this time, it was actually done by
That's true.
women, so. I thought that was kind of an interesting thing that in fact, it was quite descriptive.
Oh, yeah.
It was, yeah, that, which, yeah, just a culture thing within the Middle East, but it was also customary for, you know, people within these cities, that if they had extra room, they were to give it out to people, who may be seeking this room. Dustin, can you read Numbers 9 verses 10 to 11? Then Alan, can you read nothing yet?
Dang. Numbers 9, 10, 11.
Yep.
Speak to the people of Israel, saying, if any one of you or of your descendants is unclean through touching a dead body, or is on a long journey, he shall still keep the Passover to the Lord. In the second month, on the 14th day at twilight, they shall keep it. They shall eat it with unleavened bread and bitter herbs.
So, I think it's a little interesting, you know, as kind of like very like rule following as a lot of the Jewish practices are, you know, verses 9 and 10, it talks about like, if your hands were unclean, it was still okay to participate in the Passover. It wasn't ideal, but still to participate in it. which where, we've seen before where the Pharisees were giving on to the disciples for, doing things with unclean hands. Additionally, but yeah, and then traditionally the feast was, it was generally just, the unleavened bread with the sour herbs, but then also probably some sort of lamb or young goat along with it, so. That's all I have for those verses, just maybe a little bit more background on the Feast of Unleavened Bread and why there was this urgency and how they kind of got this room and whatnot. So any other thoughts about this section verses? And I think it just goes to show also just kind of the Lord's providence and whatnot, where the disciples were like, hey Jesus, time's coming, and he's like, oh, you're gonna find this man, he's gonna go to a house, and the house, the owner of the house is gonna have this kind of thing. It wasn't like, it was, the house was furnished and everything they needed, tables, it was perfectly set up, but yeah, so any other thoughts on this section?
No, I think it's a good point to make, especially in that verse 16, it's like, it says set out which of the city and found it just as he had told them, like, so it's like exactly like this is what he said, like, it's like, I mean, how else would you, have known that for sure, like, it's not. So it's a marvelous thing, and like, it's Christ's wisdom being on display, and just God's providence, all this, is very wise, and, to provide this, and, yeah, it's just really interesting to read that, just think, wow, yeah, that Christ just knew, that told him, and then that's exactly what happened. And it just, in a situation which, as you said, is actually like pretty specific. It's not like just general terms,
Mhm.
It's oftentimes you hear people giving, when they like say, oh, this is gonna happen, they speak like something bad's gonna happen. It's like, okay, and then it's like, well, can you be more specific, or like,
Yeah.
or like, I don't know, it's just this, yeah, it's just.
They were given exactly what they needed.
Yeah, yeah.
To get it. There wasn't more information that was used, and there wasn't less of what was needed.
Less, yeah.
Which it's just kind of funny. So you kind of look at what they were given and whatnot, and it almost seems like it's like, how on earth did this work out? But it was kind of like, well, this actually was like the perfect, like it fit right in place kind of.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah. So our next section of verses, we're gonna finish it out, verses 17 to 21. And when it was the evening, he came with the 12, and as they were reclining at the table and eating, Jesus said, truly I say to you, one of you will betray me, one who is eating with me. They began to be sorrowful, and saying to him at one after another, is it I? He said to them, it is one of the 12, who is dipping bread into the dish with me. For the Son of Man goes as it is written of him, but woe to that man whom the Son of Man is betrayed. It would be better for him that he had not been born. So another thing about the Passover, where it's different what we see here, they're kind of feasting together and lounging around, but originally when we look at the Passover out here in Exodus 12:11, it was eaten quickly. They were were on the move, they were moving around, they had all their stuff with them. Yep.
This is how you are to eat it. With your cloak tucked into your belt, your sandals on your feet, your staff in your hand. Eat it in haste before.
So yeah, no, I think that was just another little interesting thing about kind of how I know it was also said in my commentary that a lot of times, all of this stuff was, all these practices and feasts were kind of lost and then come back and whatnot, just kind of like, the destruction of the temple and the ups and downs of the church throughout the time. And so that was kind of, kind of showed that like there's like an ebb and flow of kind of this feast, but that kind of changed ultimately to what it is that we have here at the Last Supper. So Why do you think Jesus revealed to all the disciples that one of them was going to betray them? I mean, this kind of seems like he's just causing, he's just stressing everybody out.
Well, I think too, it's because he'd spent such a long time with the disciples. And like, like they'd spent a long time with each other and they'd done a lot of personal stuff. And then he's like, hey, tonight, one of you guys have basically betrayed me. And it was kind of like, what? Like, I think it's just because of the fact that they were all very close with each other. And so.
Mhm. No, yeah, I think, I think Jesus is also like, trying to reveal what the reason of, some people would say like his downfall, but like, what's about to occur, I think it's, kind of just going to show the fulfillment of, the prophecies and, can you read, Psalms 41:9?
Even my close friend, someone I've trusted, one who shared my bread, has turned against me.
So, a very, in the Middle East and in the culture, if somebody who you were to share a meal with betrayed you, that's like the highest level of like, treachery, of like, backstabbing and whatnot. So, it's very like, not only when Jesus, he states that one of you gonna betray me, but it's like, it's, I think in all cultures, somebody who you share life with and then they betray you, it's horrible, but like, that specifically here, they had, culture tenses, surrounding it. But I think also you can kind of go further than just, Jesus is saying not only is it one of the 12, but he says, one of the 12 who dips with me in the dish, when they were eating these breads and whatnot, they had multiple dishes of these sour herbs on the table. So not only was it one of the 12, but Jesus could refer to somebody who he was sharing in the dish, somebody who was sitting close to him, at this moment. But yeah, it was that sauce that they kind of had with them, but that's not, don't take that as a matter of fact kind of thing also. But how do we see the disciples respond to this?
They were sad.
And they're all asking like, was it me?
Yeah.
Did I do something? Was it me?
They all immediately, which I think is kind of funny, because I think if somebody, at least if I was in that case, I'm like, it ain't me, Jesus, because that one time I'd be immediately covering myself. But here I think it's pretty humble in a way that they're all like, Christ, is it me? Have I done that to you? What was it? Kind of a thing, which is a very different response than, that I would have done kind of a thing.
Yeah, I think it'd be a lot better or funnier if they were like, oh, it's definitely Judas.
Yeah.
We all know.
No, yeah, I mean, I'm sure they certainly had their thoughts, but I mean, I think
Yeah.
like their initial responses seem to be pretty. I mean, we all know the disciples, they aren't the brightest bunch, and it should certainly fall short, but like at the same time, we're not much different from them. And so like I don't know, I just find that kind of interesting. But yeah, no, yeah, when we see the disciples, they're sad and they're filled with a lot of distrust with themselves. Yeah, can you read Matthew 26:25? This just goes further because, here it says the disciples, but in Matthew, it's, Judas specifically.
Judas, who would betray him, answered, is it I, Rabbi? He said to him, you have said so.
So yeah, I mean, like even Judas, who literally just made the deal with the Pharisees, is lying to Jesus's face. He's like saving face, being like, Christ, is it me? Is it me you're referring to, kind of thing? Like definitely, just trying to fit with the crowd of the other disciples. But I think it's interesting here. One of the commentaries I looked at pointed out that Jesus referred to referred to in Matthew 26, he says, is it I, Rabbi? And in Matthew 26:22, it talks about the disciples as a whole, and they're like, is it I, Lord? So like a difference is that, the disciples are viewing Jesus as Lord, as God, recognizing kind of his work and his purpose, whereas Judas, he says Rabbi, which is, traditionally teacher. So this may not be like a specific dig at Christ, but I think there is a difference there where Judas is referring to Jesus merely as teacher, maybe more so just seeing him as a political figure, more or less Lord.
Yep.
Which was something interesting I didn't see before. But either way, it's clear that Judas is he's trying to throw face and whatnot. So yeah. Any thoughts? Verses 10 through 21. That's all I have prepared for us. Any thoughts on the groundwork of the Last Supper?
I just think that's, I don't know, that's just an interesting point that like to bring up that he mentions that, and it's interesting too, because it says like, my study Bible always comments, it says there's no record of Judas ever calling Jesus Lord. Which is
Really?
quite, yeah, which is quite telling, just like how, I mean, it's the difference that makes, and it's, it's crazy, but yeah, I'm definitely very interested to talk a bit more about the Lord's Supper. So. Yeah. Questions? So. Yeah, it's the last study.
Supper. I'm sorry. That
Yep.
was-
So stick around when we come back with YouTube videos, and we're gonna be covering the Lord's Supper. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe.
Subscribe, leave a comment,
Turn on,
tag your friends.
turn on hit that notification bell.
More importantly,
Yep.
our next topic,
All right.
cheating chicken.
Bye.